Good morning, or afternoon, or evening, whatever it might be from your end. Um, this is the first of most likely many online lectures we're going to be doing as we finish out the semester. And I thought what I'd like to do is give you a little update before we get going. First off, we heard last night, I'm taping this on Friday, I guess it's the 20th, and I found out last night officially that we're moving to 100% online for the rest of the semester. So that means everything I've prepared, and I'm sure you have similar issues in other classes you're taking that have to get ready for this transition. One of which is to give you, sort out a new syllabus and grading components and that sort of thing. Now that we're in a different delivery mode, I want you, if you could, and I know this is probably a difficult request, but because this is pretty trying times for everybody, but we're kind of going down uncharted territory. And I mean, if you think it's, for those of us in education, I think we're going through some pretty tough times. It's pretty challenging times. I think those of you, the distance students getting this that are in industry, I'm sure are feeling a little bit even more. I mean, David Ellington, who's a distance student, over a week ago indicated that he had at that time developers pausing future work. Since that time, I mean, I got a blast this morning that Pennsylvania is halting all non-essential business operations, including construction. I have been working on a research project with DOT and a consulting engineer, actually an active engineer in the industry, and in conversations with him yesterday, they've closed his office and everybody's moving to work on, at home. So I mean, this is a traumatic time period for all of us, and I'm not asking for you to accept anything but the best moving forward. But it's going to take me a little time to sort out how we're going to finish out the semester as it relates to topics, how to sort out the project, how to reorient it or reposition or reorganize the grading. So my commitment to you is that I will finalize all of that over the next week and a half. And by the time the next online lecture is scheduled, which is March 31st, you'll have everything you need to understand how we're going to close out the semester. The decisions I've made so far, first off, the project due date, the semester project that you're working on in groups, that is the due date for that. I've pushed back to April 17th. At this time, I'm leaning towards no presentations on the project. I'm not sure how to effectively do that with all of you now being remote. I think that might be an incredible challenge. So I need to think about that for a day or two, and I'll come to a decision on that. If you have any thoughts or comments that you'd like to share, please get them to me. Shoot me an email. I'd welcome your input there. I want you in the interim until I finalize this, at least, and I think it's probably going to hold for the rest of the semester. What I'm thinking will probably be the way we move forward is I will tape lectures, get them to you before Tuesday, and those of you that that used to be on campus, hopefully your schedule's still free at this point. And probably what I'd like to do is open up a Zoom meeting. It may last 10 minutes or it may last 2 hours to talk about any issues you may have or concerns or things you may not understand, possibly talk about some of the problems you're having on the project and you want some feedback on that. And the beauty about Zoom, like I think most of them, I can tape it. So if you can't attend, those of you in distance land, you can view at least what those of us that were able to make the meeting actually discuss. But again, I'm going to finalize that in my approach there again over the next week and a half. So please keep that time frame open every Tuesday from 12:30 to 3, and we'll sort out how and if we use that moving forward. In the short term, what I'm going to cover today is, because I think we've got to push through this estimating side of this class so you are prepared to finish your project. It's a pretty big component, so I'm going to take the first phase of it today, which is talking about the RS mean square foot. In other words, looking at square foot estimates. I also want to give you a little bit of feedback on the schedules that you sent me for the last project. And then on March 31st, we're going to be talking about how to take that square foot estimating template and incorporate assembly pricing to get a much more accurate estimate of what a conceptual project's worth, okay? So with that in mind, let's go ahead and get started. First off, I just picked out some of the schedules that were submitted, and this one is from, you can see who the group is on the lower right. My reaction to this, first off, it's in a very, I like the flow of it. It's easy to read. I think the group limited the number of activities they had, so it fit on a page pretty easily. I would suggest that the next time they do it, I don't see any need for this column, the column of predecessors, and I'd probably get rid of this column over here, these numbers. I'm not sure that makes any sense to keep. I guess it does if you keep that column, but I think both of them are probably not necessary. I think the other thing to be, and I'm not trying to be critical of this from a graphic standpoint, you might want to consider putting in some sight lines, and this I might suggest you do one every quarter, again to let it make it a little bit more easily read. There is some logic issues here. I'm not sure what happened here. That there should have been start to start, I believe. I'm not sure why you have them. It looks like start. I'm just not sure how you overrode this. It looks like they're taking logic from there to this, and if they haven't overrid this, that would have slid this entire balance of the schedule to the right. So I'm not sure what happened there. And I think you have the same problem down here. I'm not sure what you're doing with that. You might want to recheck your logic. If you're doing finish to start, I think that's logical, but apparently you've got, if you lock these things in, if you fix the start date or the end date on an activity, you're overriding the ability, or in this case, it may be that you didn't have these relationships, these activities set on auto schedule, and you had to manually schedule them, and maybe this was just not scheduled yet. In other words, the data's in there, but you haven't made it update, okay? So, but other than that, it looks like a very effective schedule. I have not, at this juncture, perused and totally, I shouldn't say totally, but effectively and comprehensively looked at your logic, and I hope to do that over the next few days. I've been kind of sidetracked on other issues. But anyway, a great effort and a very, very good start. This is another one here. I'm not sure why the group left that in. Maybe you don't know how to take it out. If not, you need to get a hold of me. I'm not sure, again, why you're leaving that in. I certainly don't understand why you're leaving the legend in. I'm not sure that you need it in this case. And I'm also not sure why you have such large spacing between activities. I think what may have happened is that you didn't have this column wide enough when you put these in, and it started wrapping and expanding the height of the row. I think if you collapsed and got these rows back to look like this spacing, your schedule would have fit nicely on one page, and it would have, because you scrunched it up in the vertical direction, it would have spread more out in, I think, in the horizontal too. You probably would have wound up using the entire page. As far as the logic, I don't know. I haven't looked at it. You can see what's noticeably missing on this one is critical path. Again, you may not have checked that option, to show the critical path. And it's also, again, I'll stop there. The time scale's not bad. You've got a title. You might want to consider, again, what's happened here. The beauty about using this page more effectively and spreading it out is you now can read it better too and actually assess what you have. The last one I wanted to take a peek at was this one. A couple things here, okay? Way too much detail on your activities. Don't forget, you're in the planning stage. I mean, you're getting these things down to 1 week, and I mean, really all small durations. And I'm not sure. Well, first off, that's not what I expect. Okay, I think you ought to try to get your schedules on this project down to 50 activities or less. Focus predominantly on the development side, and maybe get it down to 5 or 6 activities on the construction side. Maybe, site work, foundation, structure, and enclosure, whatever, and finishes. And if you want to blow that up, which would be great, do that and blow it up in a group. If you collapse it, the group can be collapsed so it's a single line on your cover sheet. Okay. Again, think about how to convey it. And again, this column's unnecessary, that column's unnecessary. I'm not sure what you did here. I frankly can't figure it out unless you picked a bar design such that you can't see it. I don't know. I mean, to me, it's almost unreadable because you can't tell what you're doing here. Okay. And then you've obviously got something happening here that you have controlled this. Somehow you've got a constraint in there that you may have consciously put in or inadvertently put in. But you can see at this point, you literally are telling yourself, if I read this verbatim, there's a period of roughly, a whole year where you're not doing anything, which is not reasonable. So this should have been caught, excuse me, you got to the last minute and weren't able to catch it, but I would hope you would do much better on the project, okay? And this is just a blow up of that same thing. I don't understand it, so I won't waste any more time on it. This is, for those of you, I used this project a couple years ago when I actually had students in MRED program, Masters of Real Estate Development. And this is what they came up with for the list of activities, for the role in office, and this is what they came up with their sequence. I'm not saying it's right, okay? I'm not suggesting that to you. I am suggesting to you, 25 or 20 students that are going through a development program, real estate development program, which probably have a little bit more insight than most of you, and most likely than I. They met firsthand at that time. I had them actually sit with Todd Stedman. We went down to the city, and they had what you had, but front and center. I mean, in his environment. What I'm encouraging you to do, okay, is take a look at what they had for sequencing. And looking at it, I think there's some errors here. I think, for instance, selecting an architect at this point, 3 months into it, to me, that's a formal selection. They selected the architect back here because they couldn't really do this without some sort of concept drawings. And most developers don't have that ability. they have to reach out. So you're reaching out to an architect here, and when you do that, you need to be, as a developer, most of them, as well as contractors, if they're involved, you need to reach out to the entity that you think you're going to use. I mean, you'll get much better input. You reach out to anybody on the street or somebody you've never worked with before, or you would be very unlikely to do the job, you'll probably get less than a solid effort. Whereas if you reach out to somebody you have a relationship with, back in this point, you probably will get what you need to do a feasibility. But anyway, you may find other issues as you go through this. I thought it was appropriate for you to take a peek at it, okay? All right, let's get on with the first leg of estimating, okay? Some of this, is old hat to y'all. Somebody has to pull together an estimate or a budget for feasibility. Somebody has to start evaluating certain options, quality. You're making decisions. Same way you would do when you did a conceptual estimate on your house if you're going to build it. You're going to decide at this point, is it brick or is it going to be vinyl siding? Am I going to throw carpet everywhere, or am I going to get some really expensive flooring? You're making decisions. Am I going to use solid core wood doors, or am I going to use, knockdown frames with hollow core? The quality decisions the quality expectations you want in the project have to be filtered in pretty early. They have to be factored into your development of an estimate. And you're doing that, again, to really determine what the cost is at that point. There's a lot of people that estimate the cost of projects. Some of them do it very effectively. Some of them do it what I would consider a pathetic effort. But everybody, connected with the game, with construction and development, design, construction, and development, has the ability to do some semblance of an estimate. The question is what level of quality. By and large, what the industry has started to recognize is that contractors generally are and should be in the best position to develop an estimate. And much like you might reach out to an architect early to get some conceptual designs, it's pretty common for a developer to reach out to a contractor, or maybe two contractors or more, early on to get their insight. There's essentially 4 types of estimates, and we could add maybe make it 10, but these are the 4 general types. And conceptual estimate means you're doing it really early on, and generally during the feasibility period. Which at that juncture, you're doing mostly square foot estimate, what they call high-level estimate, and maybe sprinkling in some assembly pricing, okay? Which is what we're going to do. You're going to do this for the project. And I'm going to show you how to start with this today, okay? And then we're going to get into the assembly next week. Schematic estimates, you're starting to get some detail now. The structures probably reasonably well defined. You probably have made decisions, or at least narrowed it down as far as skin options, envelope options. You probably have an interior layout. Again, you may not know much about it, but you're starting to have some of the big decisions made at that juncture. You also have now a set of documents that are getting more and more meat, so you can quantify more and more things. You'll start understanding how much glass you have versus, Drive-It or IFAS or metal siding or whatever. Very similar to what you've got now on the project, except you roll forward a month or two, and you have even more detail on what you can quantify. Since you can quantify it, you start moving more and more towards assembly pricing. As you get into design development, as you get more and more information on the documents, you have a combination typically of assembly pricing and actual detailed estimating, which essentially means you're taking a look at every nut and bolt and pricing. You're drilling down on the details, both you and subcontractor and vendor community, which is what you do if you're going to bid 100% documents. Um, Conceptual estimates, as you well know, I think by now, they're prepared early in the design process. Um, Generally, there's a minimum amount of detail available. You rely a lot on historical data, your past experience, and the accuracy of any conceptual estimate really depends on your knowledge base. From two fronts, okay? Your knowledge based on that particular type of construction, and also what you can glean from the conceptual documents so far, and what kind of an interaction you've had with the owner, the architect, to kind of clarify the intent. You know, where is this project headed? I mean, what do you look, you know, at that point you're asking questions about, you know, what should the envelope look like? I mean, what are the options there? Is the DRB going to require us to use an IFAS, or can we get by with, or do we want to use a hardy board? I mean, you're having those discussions. You're talking about, again, even at that point, the level of quality for some of the interior finishes, trying to get a fix as best you can on what the building's going to actually embody, okay? And again, the purpose of all this is to evaluate feasibility, set some design parameters. It's not uncommon when you come out of that, okay, well, you know, we have X dollars, which often is even, you know, you might have 5,000 or 10,000 square feet of exterior enclosure. Hey, got 10,000 feet, we've got 40% is going to be glass, the balance is going to be X, and here's the numbers we've got for both of those. Again, to give the design individuals some sort of guidance on where to head. And again, it helps in, often if you're looking at alternative options, which most developers have, it lets them start comparing the various projects. This is a graph that shows you, I'm trying to share with you the accuracy of an estimate from low to high relative to the scope definition, which is concept to CDs. And the way it normally evolves is this: as you learn more and more and more about a project, as scope is more clearly defined, the accuracy of the estimate improves, which is somewhat intuitive to all of us, okay? Now, what most developers, most of us are working earlier on, they don't want to wait. They can't wait for that level of accuracy with CDs, because why? They're making commitments back here. And they're lining up financing, they're lining up equity partners, they're trying to make decisions on whether or not to go, no go on a project, all those things, okay? It doesn't mean that, you know, I should have drawn this graph that, you know, probably got to change this from estimate accuracies from low being plus or minus 20% to high being plus or minus 2%. So how do you raise the accuracy of the estimate earlier on? Think about that for a second. How do you do that? How does an owner do that? You know, we've talked about this on repeated occasions throughout this semester. Contractors, designers, owners, everybody starts picking niches. Now, granted, they might pick multiple niches, but nonetheless, they pick niches. And if you want to get an accurate estimate as an owner, you better get somebody involved that's been there, done that multiple times before. Because the more you know about it, the more you've done it, the better historical database you have. And that largely is relegated to contractors. I'm not saying architects don't keep a cost database, but it's generally more high level. Contractors, at some juncture, all this stuff gets well defined, and at some juncture, they know actual cost, in-place cost of work that they're building. And that information, then gets pulled back to a database that helps them, estimate more accurately early on what another project's going to cost of similar nature. So it's key who you get involved, right? Because project size impacts, I mean, again, the economy of scale here, complexity, and the required quality has to be factored in. Geographical location, not just from resource availability, but from cost. It costs more in other areas of the country than others. I mean, there are cheap places to build and there are expensive places to build for the same building, as you're going to find out here in a minute. Site considerations. Generally speaking, on every project you do, even at a concept stage, you need to take a separate look at the site. Because to get a site buildable, which means get it to grade and get the utilities that are probably going to be needed to the site and the access that's going to be required to get onto site, when you get finished. If you got to cut in, 3 road access, and you got to bring utilities, 5,000 or 2,000 feet. I mean, all that stuff has to be factored into the estimate. And site conditions, site costs are generally unique for every project and need to be looked at separately. Time, how far out is it? When are you going to start? What season are you going to start? How much duration do you have? I mean, if an owner comes to you and says, listen, I need a 12-month project in 12 months, that's one cost. If I need a 12-month project in 10 months, that's probably another cost. Again, it has to be factored in. Market considerations, and again, what the economy's doing certainly has implications. Inflation. I mean, most of the deals that an owner looks at, that you're helping them out at this juncture, they may not get started for a year or two. What you're paying for concrete today may not be what it's going to sell for 2 years from now. And all those things have to be factored into a conceptual estimate. And then, who the owner is. I mean, I'm talking more from a contractor standpoint and how they're approaching it. There's certain owners and certain delivery methods and certain architects that have implications for cost that both positive and negative, okay? And then lastly, from a contractor standpoint, which owners have to deal with, is how desirable is the project? If a project's desirable, people tend to get more competitive, more responsive. A project that is not desirable, generally garners less competition, both at the contractor and the subcontractor level, which tends to drive up costs. All right. What I'm going to try to expose you to over the next few minutes, and hopefully it don't take more than 30 to do this, is some cost databases. And at the outset, let me share this with you, okay? RS Means has been developing cost databases and slicing and dicing that database in various ways to get different information out of it for different uses. They've been doing it for decades, okay? And you see here, 2019, it was the 40th annual edition, so that's over 4 decades now. And they're good at what they do, okay? I'm not trying to take anything away from them. But they're not in the action. They're not front and center, okay? They're collecting information from various projects around the country. I forget how many they collect, but it's a sizable number. And then having to factor in a lot of different variables that really are tough. I mean, they're using a fair amount of judgment to come up with all this stuff. What I'm suggesting to you is that if a contractor does not have a cost database that's better than Means for hotels, they probably have no business doing hotels because they don't know what they're worth. So whether it's at a conceptual stage or at a detailed stage, they're probably working a different type than they're used to. And my message is this, and I used, let me put it this way. When I was in business, we used Means database only when we didn't have insight, and that was rare, and better knowledge. But number two, probably the most common use that I thought was effective with Means was transferring, and we're going to do this here shortly, cost of a building in location X to the same building in location Y. I mean, it's Location factors, I think Means has a pretty good handle on that, probably better than most contractors. And I'll show you what I mean here in a minute, okay? Anyway, we're going to use the two books that Means publishes this semester. One is the square foot cost, and I got both square foot for commercial and square foot, I think, for residential. And then we're going to use the assembly Means, which is a different publication. Same database, it just sorted a different way, okay? All right, first thing I want to share with you is location factors. RS Means, all the data in it is collected nationally. Okay, there's projects in there there's hotels in there from New York and hotels in from Louisiana and Iowa and the West Coast. So, and there's cost differences, okay, in working in those locations. I mean, think about cost in New York versus South Carolina. We don't need to know what it is to know that it costs less to build in South Carolina. It costs less to build in the South, predominantly because of what? Labor costs. Now, what Means does is when they collect all this, and everything you see published in Means, when you pick out a cost of a building or an assembly or a detailed item, it's the national average. If you want the cost of forming an elevated flat plate slab, it might be $2.80, excuse me, a foot, I don't know what it is, as a national average. But it probably doesn't cost $2.80 in Clemson. And it probably costs more than $2.80 in New York. These location factors give you that ability to adjust Means average pricing, national averages, to your locale. A prime example is here, they've got, 8 location factors for South Carolina. And what this is saying here is that let's look at the commercial side, all right, first. If you'll notice, there's a lot of .84s. That means South Carolina is 84% of the national average. So if it costs $1 nationally on the average, it costs 84 cents in South Carolina. In Columbia, 84 cents in Spartanburg, and 85 cents in Charleston, but in Beaufort, it's down to 80 cents. Same logic is regarding residential. And you might ask yourself, why is the difference in residential? We're 84% on the average for commercial of the national average, but yet we're only 95 to mid to high 90s, or mid to low 90s on the residential. In fact, what it's telling you that residential costs in South Carolina are close to the national average. Why is that? Think about that a minute. The disparity between the cost of a house in South Carolina and the national average is only 5, 6, 7 cents percent. The disparity on a commercial side is 15%. I would submit to you there's a couple things probably at play here, okay? And again, I don't know, but if you think about it, there's some validity to it. One, material prices might be cheaper in the South, only because why? Maybe the products are cheaper where we have probably better access to woods, which is a lot of residential. We just tend to have more trees in the South. And I think the big component of these costs are labor. And most labor for residential in the South is across the board, both commercial and residential, is open shop, non-union. When you move further north in the West Coast, some of the bigger cities, most of the commercial work is union, higher labor rates, which drives the disparity between South Carolina on commercial factors. But I would venture to say a fair amount of the residential work in the north and high union areas is still done with non-union, open shop, merit shop carpenters on these residential projects. So you're seeing that possibly the labor rates are not that different for a carpenter in Iowa building a house or New York State than they are in South Carolina. Again, that would be my premise or conjecture, okay? If you look at New York, you're seeing there what? And this is New York, New York, as you would expect. It's higher. It's 32% for commercial and 39% on residential, higher than the national average. All this is trying to tell you when you get, again, the national average cost for something, whether it be a yard of concrete or a square foot of a building. If it costs $1 nationally on the average, it costs $1.32, 32% more in New York. All right? Now, conceptual estimating. We're going to take a look at a known project type, a different location, and a different year, okay? Now, if you want to look at a different year, what you're looking at here is historical cost indexes, which literally is giving you some insight into how it changes year to year. What this is telling you, in Charleston, South Carolina, $1.71 of cost, something that cost $171 in 2014, now is estimated to cost $190 in 2019. It's really trying to share with the escalation of cost over the years. A large part of that's inflation, okay? So this is telling, if you want to build the same building that you built in Clemson, 6 years later in Clemson, I think that's, if you factor this in, I think that's a 10% cost increase. The building's going to cost 10% more if built today or last year. It's just trying to give you a measure of how costs escalate year over year. And think of it in terms of inflation, okay? So now you have two forms, or two, you got a location and you got historical cost index. You got a location factor and you got essentially an inflation factor, okay? This is right out of the means book, and what it's given you is some options now with means. You can very easily take an estimate and compare construction costs for different years in the same city. What I just did, just use the historical data, the inflation numbers. You can also very easily estimate and compare construction costs in different cities for the same year. Again, I'll show you that here in a minute. And then lastly, or thirdly, you can estimate and compare construction costs in different cities for different years. And you can also compare that trends in the city with the national average, or extend the trends. In other words, what you expect inflation to do over the near term. Let's take a look at some of these, okay? All right, the first one is a building cost $10 million in Columbia, South Carolina in 2005. What will the same building cost to build in Columbia, same city, 14 years later? The way to figure that out, you take the index, which would be, when we're talking index, we're talking about these indexes, okay? Right here. And notice Columbia's here, right? While we're here, why don't we write these down? Take a minute. I haven't written them down, but hopefully I didn't make a mistake on this. But 2019, Columbia is 187.4. 2006, everybody see that? 187.4. 2006, it's 109.6. Let's see if that now rings true, if I didn't mess up this equation. It's 2005, so I missed it. So if you take the index for 2019, the index for 2005 for Columbia, take it times the cost in 2005, which is the 10 million, you'll get the cost in 2009. You can see I got the 187.4 right, but I've got, I think 2006 here. It really should have been 118.7. That ratio times 10 million. If you want to build the same building in Columbia 14 years later, it'll cost what? Roughly 50% more almost 60% more. Okay? This one's pretty easy to, and again, intuitively, you know it's going to rise in cost. I don't think there's any time, I can't remember a time it went down. So all you're trying to do is what? Take that cost and multiply it times the index, the increase in that index. All right, let's take another issue here. A building cost $9 million in Columbia in 2010. What would the same building cost to build in Chattanooga in 2019? So we need, again, I probably should have put all this here to make it easy for me, but we're saying Chattanooga, Tennessee versus Columbia. So we're saying Columbia in 2010, and we're saying Tennessee in 2019. Let's roll back. Bear with me while I roll back to that form, okay? All right. Tennessee in 2019. Chattanooga. 2019 for Tennessee is should be what? This one right here. I think it's what? Chattanooga's 191.3, and Columbia for 2010 would be what? Should be 140.2. Gosh, I hope that's the numbers I got. Let me roll forward here, see what we did. Are y'all seeing where I'm grabbing these numbers from? Voila! All right. So what we did there is we had the index where we want to transfer to Tennessee in 2019. What's that index versus the index of the city we built it in 2010? And then take that times the cost that was back in 2010. And now we've not only transferred the cost for that project to a different state, different city, we've transferred that cost to a different time frame, or what, 9 years later. All right, let's take another one here. A building cost $9 million in Columbia in 2010. What will that same building cost to build in Chattanooga in 2022? Now, realize our cost database, our index is only run to 2019. So let's get the Columbia one first, okay? Columbia, wait a minute, I keep forgetting what I'm doing here. We want Columbia in 2010. I'm not sure we didn't already do that, but let's see what we got here. Columbia 2010 is Columbia 2010. That's that same 140, I'm sorry, 0.2. All right, so let's roll forward and see if we can't get the index for whatever city we're trying to transfer it to here. We're trying to transfer it to Chattanooga, Tennessee in 2022. What you got to do now is extrapolate, okay? We know that in Tennessee, great, that we've got to 2019. We want to carry it now to 2022. So, excuse me, what you need to decide is, what to expect for future inflation. And what I would encourage you to do that is, what you're looking at here is, I went ahead and posted the last 6 years. You might go back 10 years. It depends, okay, what you feel comfortable with as a developer. And what I did was take the index for those years, and what you see on the right is it's telling you what, between 2018 and 2009, prices rose 1.9%. They rose 3.2% from 2018 to 2017, and all the way down. And you can see over a 6-year period, the 6 years I sampled, the prices rose roughly 2.3% a year. The last 3 years, they averaged 2.5. Now, if you were sitting here and we hadn't had the COVID-19 and looking forward, 2.5 a year, you might be a little uncomfortable with, right? Because costs have been rising pretty rapidly in late 19 and early 20, and 1.9%, even 2.5% may not be enough. But again, that's a judgment call between you and the developer. What I would encourage you to do if you're doing this for real is put your judgment against it, and then literally, get the designer and the developer's input into, what are they feeling for expectations. You can also go to a lot of industry indexes to do forecasts of future cost. Anyway, you have to somehow come up with a number, all right? And what I did here, I went ahead and assumed 3%. And based on that, this is what that index grows to. So, the answer is 2022 in Tennessee, I'm forecasting an index of 209, and it's 9 million. So now the cost is, if you're going to build that thing, that similar building we built in 2010 in South Carolina, and now build it 12 years later in Tennessee. Based upon these calculations, it should be worth roughly $13,400,000. Hopefully, you've been able to understand, and I haven't lost you. What I'm gonna post this also online. I want you to do this exercise, each of you individually, okay, and submit it. When I put it as my intent moving forward will be, I will post lectures by that Tuesday of the week that we would have normally been meeting for your in-class students. So I guess you distance students get these lectures a couple days earlier than you've been getting them. And I will make exercises, or I should say the exercises themselves, due by that following Monday. That'll give the distance students a weekend to do an exercise. That'll also give me some feedback before we are next class, and then if we need to talk about it in that Zoom meeting, we can do that too, okay? But I'll post this one online under assignments, so you probably get a notice here shortly over the next day or two, and it'll be due, like I said, this one will be due a week from Monday, which would be, 29th, 28th. All right, a couple of things before we break, okay? A preview for next time you see an online lecture. RS means, and this comes out of the square foot book too, okay? Not only do they give you these locations and these indexes, they pick out, I think there's like 20 or 30 typical building types. And they literally take that, and in this case, you're looking at one we're going to be using for rolling. And they're telling you, all I'm trying to tell you is, and we'll go through all this in detail next time, but they're telling you the one they picked out to give additional detail on. In other words, these are all square foot numbers, and for various size and different exterior skins and whatever. And they show you how these numbers are developed. They pick one out and they give you this. In other words, when you pick this up, you can get close. If it relates to size, perimeter, number of skin, and hopefully size there. But now, if you want to see how they developed that 116, go to the next page in the RS Means book, and they give you this breakdown by substructure, shell, interiors, services, equipment. All of these, take note, all of these things in the square foot book and Means do not include site work. And for the reasons we talked about earlier. There's a lot of disparity, it depends on the site. And all of them, if you go to the total, include various markups and architect fees that we'll talk more about next time. But what I'm going to try to show you the next time we meet, okay, is this. We're going to take this format, the one you see right here, and I'm going to show you how you adjust that to get it more project specific for your project. In other words, on this one, let's see here. For the exterior enclosure, it's got vinyl siding and all wood studs. That's not what we have on the project downtown. So we need to adjust that number based upon some assembly pricing for what you have or what you anticipate having on that project downtown, okay? So anyway, that's what we'll go forward to. Now, the confusing thing, so, and I didn't do this intentionally, right, is when you look at Canvas right now, you'll see 4 RS means databases. If I'm not mistaken, you'll see 2019 square foot, you'll see 2016 square foot, you'll see 2015 square foot, and maybe a third one, I forget. But what has happened, and I'm not trying to confuse you. Before all this debacle, before all this COVID-19, I was set up to do this first lecture, actually before we even broke. And then I got pulled away to Vegas. And to do that, I went ahead and PDF'd the pieces of the 2019 RS mean square foot that we would need to use. I didn't get to this coming lecture to include the 2019 assemblies pricing, and I can't do that now. We have essentially shut down, and I can't get access to the library where these books are. They're on reserve. I don't see any way to effectively get a 2019 counterparts. So, for your project, I think the most effective thing to do, I have 2016 up, and I think, and 2015 residential. It's the same format, okay? It's the same setup. If you understand how to use RS means for 2016 and 2015, you understand how to use it for 2019 and 2020. It's just that the data will be dated, which means you can do an estimate based upon 2016 database. Then you just have to do what? Adjust it for doing it 3 or 4 years later. And we'll talk more about that. I apologize. So today we've looked at 2019 numbers, and you're going to use that to do this exercise, because that's all you need is a 2019 square foot. Moving forward after that, for assembly pricing and for your project, you're going to be using the 2016 and 2015 for residential. And I apologize, but it is what it is, and it's not so much important that you're using the right database, but more importantly that you understand how to use them, okay? All right, well, you have a great week, and stay safe, and I'm going to do my best to make this a productive session as we close out the semester. In the meantime, like I said, be safe, take care of each other, or take care of yourself and your loved ones, and we'll see you online in a week, okay? Bye-bye.